Central Control? Evening, Central Control. This is Flight 118 Dynasty. We are beginning our descent. Copy that, Dynasty. We see you. Nice and smooth as always. Be sure to bring out the chilled beer, Central. It's been a long flight. Air Traffic Controller Rick Monroe smiled. He watched the blips and bleeps on his radar screen. It's all clear for landing, Captain. It's a cold night here in Colford, but a clear one. The west runway is clear for a landing. Copy that, Central. Rick pushed his chair back from the table. He lifted the phone from the wall. Get the landing party out on the west runway. We have incoming. Order received. Time to greet Flight 118 Dynasty. Notify hospitality they're going to want to be there. A buzz was sent through the airport. A privately commissioned jet was preparing to land and with an important guest on board. The traffic directors were on the front line. The west runway was one of their longest. It was usually reserved for large commercial flights to the Great States or further afield. When Controller Neil was told it was a private jet, he naturally assumed the kind of smaller aircraft the privileged class who found themselves in need of hopping from country to country like to use. His excitement lifted when he spotted a Boeing cast a shadow down upon them as it followed its directed pathway. The wheels dropped from its enormous body and it touched the ground with the smoothness of a bird of prey snatched its meal from the forest floor. The hospitality staff were put on high alert. The airport lounge was buzzing with anticipation of the Great State's arrival. A kettle of squawking reporters hopped around waving recording devices, ready to pick at the juicy meat of a story being thrown at them. Freshly pressed uniforms, straightened backs, standing to attention, District Manager of the Colford City Airport, Rebecca, looked on as the gangway slowly approached the craft. I arrived just as they were lining up to welcome the guest of honour. Best foot forward, girls, instructed Rebecca. From the pilot's cockpit and onto the gangway, wheeling a flight case behind him and in full uniform, stepped Captain Charles Owen. He looked rejuvenated after flying the sizable aircraft from the Great States. Whilst he wore a black tie to show his family still mourned the loss of Bobby Owen, he beamed and waved to the waiting press corps. Flanked by his co-pilot and two finely dressed stewardesses, the Cappy took centre stage. Welcome back to Colford, Captain. Rebecca stepped forward. As district manager, she had the honour of greeting the Owen Inc. CEO. I'm afraid the press has caught wind of your arrival, so you won't be able to escape discreetly. Chick removed his hat. I have no mind to, he assured her, clutching his hat to his chest. In fact, I believe I will have a few words. Of course, Rebecca agreed. She stepped aside to allow the Cappy and his staff to present themselves. Without allowing himself to be overwhelmed by the flood of questions he had to wade through, Chick spoke to the reporters. It makes my heart mighty glad to see all your familiar faces. Peter, he pointed to one of the reporters. Nice to have you back. I hope you're well recovered. Peter giggled shyly, but he still hungrily clutched his recording device. I'm happy to answer some questions, but given recent circumstances, I'm afraid I'll have to keep it brief. Captain, Captain, cried a feisty female reporter in a skirt suit. She was pushing her assistant, who was holding a recorder in front of her. Yes, Margaret. The Cappy chose her first. Sometimes it was best to start by feeding the hungriest of the animals. It stopped them getting too eager. Firstly, condolences on the loss of Bobby from all of us at Colford Express. He was a lovely man and a sad loss. Well, thank you, Charles returned. Do go on. Is it purely the loss of Pops that has brought you back to Colford? The reporter asked. The press had been left feeling sketchy on the details. The campaign loyalist fleet attacks had been kept from public news as much as possible, covered with stories of random violence that was nothing new to Colford. Destruction, asbestos, and rejuvenation of the area were all delivered to the news feeds Owen Inc. owned, and these falsities were spat back out into the face of the public. Maybe they would learn the truth eventually, but in that moment the truth did not suit the Cappy's agenda. Given that the city main king had to remain low-key as best as he could, as well as Paddy Mac, the Owens had the chance to control the information leaked to the public. They stopped their allies from having a cause for alarm and their enemies having reason to emboldened. It is my sad duty to bid farewell to a great man, a much-loved man and my father. He will always be sorely missed, but I do have business in this great city of ours. My family's heart is at home here, so I will always have cause to return. Can you give us some details on your father's death? Asked another reporter. I'm afraid at this time, Taylor, I cannot. I will brief you when the time is right. But for now, I ask that you respect my family's privacy and allow us to deal with our grief. Margaret pushed in again. Will you still be continuing to pursue your investment into the harvester farm? Chick nodded. Of course, and wholeheartedly. Pals would be the first one to say, boy, family is of the utmost importance, and it is in a business that we pave the way for our family. I'd be delighted to have Miss Hobster hear the ideas I have for the future of our brand. The stewardess to the left, a brunette with a sharply cut bob, gently tapped on his shoulder. She whispered into his ear. The cappy turned back to the reporters again with a smile. Well, I've just been informed that my time is up. I thank you all for coming out. I will provide a statement in a timely manner, but for now there's much to be done. The reporters clashed as they hopped after the cappy for one last morsel of meat. With some laughing with his co-pilot, he left them behind, and his Boeing craft named Dynasty to be serviced and refueled. It was to be housed in Colford for the foreseeable future. Owen Estate would seem like a great monster hidden deep in the northern farmlands, should one venture that far. Not a tall building, but spread wide. It emerged from the wilderness and approached like a hungry predator, its windows like eyes locked upon its prey. A single light was on. The occupier was home. Back in his natural habitat, Buddy Owen stood in his father's den. His whole life he had been visiting the estate, and he was only allowed in his den by his father's invitation. Buddy, Chad, and Coops watched on as the cappy silently cleaned his gun. A favoured Ruger 10-22 with a hardwood frame. He called it Betsy. Buddy much preferred an AR-15 for hunting, but the cappy had a fondness for an antique look. The Ruger was, after all, one of the most successful rifle designs in history. There was a blank space in the wall behind him, specially reserved. Its place was to be given to a compass belonging to Henry Hen Owen on his pioneering mission that put Colford on the map. It had been acquired by the Penn auction house. The Penns would only return it at cost. Chick was adamant that it belonged in his family and was insulted that it would be asked to pay for such an item that it rightfully belonged to him. The auction house insisted that such a historical item should be placed for auction to allow anyone with an interest the opportunity to own it. Lawyers had kept the matter at a stalemate for years. With the auction house seized, there may still come a chance for the cappy to complete his collection. The bros watched as Chick pushed the cleaning rod into the barrel. He was lost in thought, as though he had forgotten he had even summoned them and asked them to stand to attention. Chapter House ruined, he cleaned. Our brotherhood humiliated. The dampness was drawn out of the barrel. My father dead. Those gibbos are tricky catching us off guard. I've already taken steps to bring that matter in hand. What I would like to know is which one of you geniuses thought it would be a great idea to give your muck powder to a 6-year-old child. Where are my express orders for you to be on your best behavior whilst you were on that farm? Yes, sir, all three brothers replied in synchrony. Well, if that's your best behavior, then you're bigger dumbasses than I ever gave you credit for. Have you set a challenge with yourselves to disappoint me? No, sir, again all three replied together. Then which one of you did it? Come on, dude, we ain't had powder since we left the chapter house, Buddy maintained. Chick looked up from his gun cleaning. His eyes met those of his son. We ain't, Buddy agreed. Be damn hard, but we ain't. After what happened to Pops, I wanted to stay sober, wanted to clear my head. Someone's trying to make me look bad, bro. Firstly, don't call me bro. And every time you open that mouth of yours, boy, it makes you look bad. I didn't do it. Someone set me up, bro. Did, Cappy. Just like those teachers were against you. Just like the local authorities were against you. Chick's attention returned to Betsy. He handled her with a gentle, loving hand. Well, this time it's true. I'll find out who and I'll deal with it, Buddy resolved. See that you do. For now, I'm paying for the child's care privately. I'm told by our nurses that she'll be just fine. Whatever the father wishes to do to you, I'm not making any of my concern. So, if you aren't responsible, I suggest you find out who was before the father's attention is no longer occupied by a sick child. That powder habit of yours may have been charming to some when you were a boy, but you're a man now, buddy. It's time for you to start behaving like one. If you're unable to kick that habit, then I'm more than happy to find someone who can help you. What do you mean? The moment Buddy asked this, he regretted it. Harbor House. I hear it can do some good. Their 12-step program has proven to be 90% effective. Come on, dude, you wouldn't put me in rehab, Buddy gasped. But it was more a plea than a challenge. I would if I thought it would do you any good. Prove me wrong. Start acting like a man. I will, Buddy agreed. He was already measuring his head the monumental mess he was having to clean up. What the cappy knew was but the tip of the iceberg. Consider you're now stripped of any authority you had. If you wish to have your chapter back, then you'll have to earn it. I've ordered some help for you. Your God, calling in a babysitter. You should be ashamed of yourself, buddy. The cabby distracted himself with the shining Betsy's glossy body. Who? Asked Buddy. When I was last in Colford, I told you if you were to disregard my requests, then I would send someone to fetch you proper. Cooper and Chad looked at Buddy. They could see his eyes widen. Who? He asked again, with a little more desperation, judging by Buddy's reaction. His Capsule brothers guessed he already knew. The expected time of arrival for the flight is 4 p.m., and you'll be at the airport to greet our guest, said Chick. He laid Betsy down gently, admiring her glow, her shapely form, her willingness to be held. He took in the 3 Capsule brothers. Now get out. The sight of y'all's ruining my appetite. The 3 turned towards the door, but Chick always had one last thing to say. Oh, Bernard, speaking of Harbour House, while you're finding this mystery stranger who gave the little girl cocaine, maybe you can also find that Baroness bitch. The search for her is heating up, and I have not forgotten the artist boy pointing a finger in my face. If you're in any way responsible for her missing status, you and I are going to go on a hunt. The den door closed over. Buddy turned to his brothers with a sob. The fuck does that mean? Good afternoon, Charles. I trust you are well and your flight was a good one, greeted Judge Conan Doyle as the staff of Owen Estate showed up to the den. Ronnie Owen was already there. Chick's younger brother had surprised the Colford community when he was the one to step up and defend Tabitha during her trial. I myself had been surprised to hear it, and Tabitha's murder spree had stemmed from the accusations that the Reverend Jerry Owen had attempted to rape her as a child, along with countless other young girls. Judge Doyle had no evidence other than the word of the girls, and the Baroness was encouraging to step forward. Taking matters into her own hands, Tabitha had essentially ended her own life. What I did observe through the trial was that Ronnie wasn't there to proclaim her innocence. It was far too late for that. He wasn't there to seek vengeance for his brother either. He knew what Jerry was. He merely asked the jury to take into account the events that had brought Tabitha to do what she did. They were the actions of a mad woman for the most part, but they shed a light on a much bigger problem in the Shady City. Sexual assault was at epidemic levels, and as difficult as it was to hear, a great many of those girls were still children. For her part, Judge Doyle listened to both sides of the story, but when the voice of the girl who called her out in her own court and murdered at least 59 people, taunted the missing man, had a history of violence, was up against a reverend from a highly respected family, who had given a lot of charity to the city and had no physical evidence against him. That was how the scales of justice measured up. The judge had heard the cries of those girls, though. No matter how loudly they sang Tabitha's praises, she was not going to be forgiven for her crimes. The sentence was death. I just hoped that in Tabitha's death, justice would be found for all those other girls she sought to protect. I'm much obliged for you coming at such short notice. With the troubles we've been having, I fear I'm locked to the homestead for the time being. Conan Doyle nodded. It's not a problem. The sooner we get things back on track, the better for all of us and for the city. The death of Joe Hicks and the escape of Reginald Penn Jr., not to mention Patrick Mack being at large, has taught me that CPD needs to come under new management immediately. Charles nodded. Ronnie also agreed. I recommended that this only be a temporary station, put in the younger brother. And I stand by that. The Black Bands have been incredibly successful in bringing in known instigators, but CPD must have a longer-term goal. Charles smiled. Whilst the murderer of her father is at large, I'll stop at nothing. Are you agreed on that, Ron? I'd hate for us to move forward if we weren't of the same mind. I agree Reginald Penn must face justice for his crimes. The city's already been torn apart enough, said Ronnie. And it's time to do what needs to be done, starting with a stronger hold on CPD. Charles Chick Owen, better known as the Cappy, slid a paper across the desk to Honourable Judge Conan Doyle. She supplied her signature. Ronnie witnessed. In a combined agreement between Owen Inc. and the High Court of Colford City, the police department were to be appointed a new commissioner. I think the first thing we should do, darling, is check into the hotel. We don't want to be carrying our luggage around any longer than necessary now, do we? Mr. Johnson said to his wife as they waited at the airport lounge for their notification for their transport to City Main. Mrs. Johnson held a glass of Mac's whisky, on the rocks. It was early for hard spirits, but it had been a bumpy flight and they were supposed to be enjoying themselves after all. Mrs. Johnson took a sip. The exhibit closes at 6. I would have really liked to have seen it. They're moving it to Len in the morning. This would be our only chance. Mr. Johnson took out his notes. It says here that the museum is just a 5-minute walk from the weir. It's just gone 4 now. We'll have plenty of time to check in, freshen up, and pop along and still catch the exhibit." As she and her husband looked closer at the city main tourist map he'd brought up on his phone, Jack realised her handbag had been kicked out from underneath their table. A man in filthy clothes who had been hanging around the airport for most of the afternoon, but not caused enough fuss for security to do anything about, closed in. He casually strolled towards the exit as though he had been intending to leave. As he passed Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, he snatched up the handbag. "My bag!" Mrs. Johnson screeched. Mr. Johnson was on his feet, but the thief was already at the exit door. As the door opened, he ran into a broad man with a naturally muscular physique. His eyes were heavy, having just arrived on a private long-haul flight. He was brought to alert by the woman's cry, though. He snatched the man. He pulled his finger back with an abrupt snap. The man squealed with pain. The man picked up the handbag. He fixed the Capital uniform he was wearing. "Boy, you just damn near ripped my shirt, you wheezing son of a bitch!" The airport security swooped in and apprehended the thief. Mrs. Johnson rushed up to the man to retrieve her bag. "Thank you," she stated sincerely. "How can I repay you?" The man grinned. "Oh, it's no worry, ma'am. No yellow-bellied thief gonna get by me." "Well, at least let me buy you a drink," she turned to her husband. "Roger," she cried, "buy the man a drink." Mr. Johnson had been so relieved for the return of his wife's bag he didn't hesitate. She had been carrying all of the reservations and travel documents. The man followed her to the table she and her husband had chosen. He stopped her and spun her around so they could meet eye to eye. "You're a pretty little thing," his grin widened. "I'm mighty glad to have met your acquaintance." Mrs. Johnson tried to smile too, but he had pushed himself so close to her it made her uncomfortable. He reached up and clutched her face with a rough hand. "Well, you're mighty pretty," he said again, "for a negress." "How dare you speak to my wife that way?" The man frowned, the wrinkles in his forehead deepened. "Can a man deliver a compliment these days?" He placed a hand on Mr. Johnson's chest and shoved him into a chair. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." The man took his seat at their table, scraping it noisily across the floor. "You invited me to drink, and I got some time to spare, so let's drink." He looked up to an aghast Mrs. Johnson. Her husband hadn't made any further movement. "Sit down, darling, and keep me company. Your pussy-ass husband here might like to see what a real man looks like." Mr. Johnson was frowning severely, but said nothing. The man gave a roaring laughter. "Where's your sense of humour? I'm just busting your balls is all." "I'm going to call security," Mr. Johnson decided. The man drank his whiskey. "Don't bother. It's going to cut into your vacation time." "Who are you?" "Billy!" A loud, Great States voice called across the lounge. Billy stood, throwing his chair back. "Buddy!" he yelled back as Chad, Cooper, and Buddy Owen crossed to greet him. Billy swallowed the rest of the whiskey and abandoned the table. He charged towards his brothers, catching Buddy in a headlock. "How you doing, you little shithead?" he cheered, rubbing his knuckles roughly on Buddy's skull. He let him go and turned his attention to Chad and Cooper. "So this is the cream of Capital crowd these days. Good God, you look like a couple of fags. What's this?" Here he imitated Cooper's usual folded arm stance. Buddy laughed heartily. William Billy Owen was the son of Cappy's cousin Jackson Jackie Owen. He was close to Buddy, but the Owen lessons over the years had given him a bullying nature. If anyone could hold Buddy to account, it would be him. Whether that was a good thing or throwing petrol into the fire remained to be seen. "So the Cappy's been chewing your ass, huh?" Billy put to Buddy as they started to exit the airport, leaving a flabbergasted Mr. and Mrs. Johnson behind. All they could hear was Billy scream, "You lost the fucking chapter house!" Billy slapped Buddy over the back of his head. "You're a fucking moron! Pals will be ashamed! God rest his soul! We gotta spray the whole damn house now. Everybody knows those jipples bring all kinds of diseases." Briefing room 40 was filled to capacity. The city main precinct of the Colford Police Department was brought together to meet their new commissioner. "Bryant," called Archer to old-time detective Bryant McGregor. Archer was younger, more energetic. Bryant was in his early 60s, with wisdom etched on his brow. He was nearing his retirement. No one would have blamed him for wanting to rest easy and leave the force, especially after his close friend Hicks had been killed. Bryant wasn't so easily swayed, though. Like the others, he waited in anticipation to meet the newly appointed chief of police. Officer Rolf Wilson was also there. He had a warm handshake and an embrace for Bryant. They hadn't seen one another since Hicks's memorial. Rolf had been partners with Hicks in their early days before he was moved on to a drug task force and Hicks gained his detective's badge. Rolf looked stressed out. He always looked stressed. Matched with Hicks' cool approach, they had always made an effective partnership. His chestnut brown hair was greying. They were all getting older, Brian had to admit. They weren't newbies anymore. Beside Rolf sat Lennon. He looked better than the last time Brian had seen him. Lennon was a fine detective, probably one to rival Hicks in his prowess, but he'd been out of the force for a while in order to deal with a gambling addiction. He had lost his house, his car, but Joe Hicks had picked up on the telltale signs before he'd lost himself. Get your fucking shit together, Joe had warned him. Do you want your kids living in a fucking caravan? Do you want to lose those kids? If anyone else had put that question to Lennon, he would have lashed out at them. But from Hicks, it made a lot of sense. It was his shit, and he did have to get it together. I wasn't given the chance to attend the briefing that day. It was internal only, but from all I had heard of the fallout as explained to me by Bryant himself, Hicks's integrity, his influence over his fellow officers had never faded. The group looked to Bryant for his leadership as longest serving. They trusted in him. They trusted that he would be true to Hicks's example. Any word on the new chief? Asked Rolf. Bryant responded. All I could get was that it was he and they brought him in from abroad. Rolf shook his head. I don't like this, he said. They should be promoting one of our own. Bryant, that was your spot. Could have been Hicks's place one day. It should have been you, Olivia Hicks had said to Bryant on the phone the night before, but we'll know better, they're thinking, when we find out who this person is. You'll know the right thing to do. I trust you. It didn't sit well with any member of the police force to have someone come in from outside to lead them, especially when the privately commissioned black brands were spreading further and further around the city, essentially taking the laws the CBD were sworn to protect and uphold out of their control. But the department had become flooded with corruption. Judge Doyle wasn't leaving it up to a few good men like Bryant, Archer, Rolf, and Lennon to wade through it. It would take someone with an outside perspective to clear the way. Deputy Chief Michelle Crawley took the speaking spot. A hush washed over the nervous police officers. Okay, I know you're all eager to meet the new chief, she said, and there's a lot of work to do, so we'll be brief. Ladies and gentlemen, Commissioner Owen. A lot of the room erupted into an applause. Whoops and cheers rang out. The doors were thrown open, and overbearing presence of William Billy Owen came sauntering through. He had a grin on his face, and he could be heard muttering to Michelle, I'll take her from here, darling. He clutched both sides of the podium and bared his teeth down on them. Well, 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 he began. It's good to be here. Time whip y'all into shape, am I right? You're right, bro, one of the officers called from the back. Bryant shot him a fiery stare, but Archer patted his arm and urged him to keep calm. Bryant couldn't. This is not Capasso, he said. Billy glared. What'd you say there, old-timer? This is not Capasso, and it's not your frat house. Isn't it enough of the black bands? Sit down, McGregor, Michelle warned. Bryant could hear the rumble of chairs behind him. Like a virulent disease, the Capasso influence in CBD had been spread quickly. It was how it had been so easy to declare one of them as chief. That, coupled with Billy's special ops background, for some he was seen as the saviour the department needed. Billy laughed, raspy and unkind. You let a pussy triplet escape your custody. You failed to find him. You let a bitch in a whore-dress murder steal and call herself a queen. You're a disgrace. Worst of all, you let one of your own have his brains splattered all across the sidewalk. And you have the audacity to wonder why I had to drag my ass all the way over here to put things right. Some of the officers cheered. Bryant and his companions were sickened. You didn't know Hicks, Bryant snapped back. Billy shook his head in exasperation. And now I never will. You lost the rat finger in triplet, you lost the hippie dyke they call the Baroness, and to cap it all off, where's the goddamn mayor? Bryant stepped forward, but Archer stopped him. No hard feelings, old-timer. In fact, you remind me of my granddaddy. He spent his final days pissing himself and thinking he was an astronaut. You got balls. But you better watch yourself. If you can't handle the heat, then it's time to drop your badge, old-timer. Bryant grilled. He stormed to the aisle and approached Billy. The new chief of police for Coleford held his hand up to prevent any of his Capasso brothers among the force from intervening, and Billy smirked. Their faces were close. Bryant pulled the badge from around his neck and dropped it onto the floor. He walked out, but before he had reached the door, Archer, Lennon, Rolf, and those others dedicated to Hicks joined him. Was it something I said? They could hear Billy jeer sarcastically. CBD had its failings, but its human element was what gave it the heart it had. That heart was torn from its chest that day.